Hi guys, I'm Woodcraft Hamster and I'm back with part 2 of carving a bowl from end grain. Now we've made a bit of progress with this. I carried on with a little bit more carving after my last video just to sort of smooth it out a bit. Still not massively deep and still a fair bit of work to go inside here, but it is coming along quite nicely. Hopefully you can see that sort of on the camera there. But the stage I'm at now is basically what I want to do is start carving away down this side, or sort of coming across at an angle down here to make this round a little bit more bowl shaped, and for that I'm going to use my axe. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just starting that off, and it is a little bit more tricky because obviously being that this is a round, it's quite difficult to sort of hold this still and chop at the same time. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to spend 5 or 6 minutes doing that, see where we get to, and move on from there. And what I should say, guys, is that when you're doing something like this, especially with a round that's a little bit unstable, just make sure that where you're holding it, your hand and especially your thumb and any sort of parts of your hand or your fingers are well away from where you're cutting. So I'm going to be cutting sort of down on the lower quarter just here. What you don't want to do is hold it like this and start chopping near your hand, because that's where accidents will happen. Okay, so you can see where I'm trying to go with this. It's only taken a few minutes to get that far. Hopefully you can see on the camera there that going in at this kind of angle does chew the wood up a little bit. So there will be a lot of finishing to do by the time I get this all completely done. And again, hopefully from my last video you can see just here, hopefully that's picking up well on the camera, we've still got a little bit of a crack in there. When I get the spoon knife out, hopefully I'll be able to reduce that a little bit more, and we shouldn't get too much of a crack in that. And again, if you look on the back side, no cracking whatsoever so far, so we're doing reasonably well. One thing I did want to mention before I carry on with this, there was a couple of questions in the comments of my last video about this in terms of how to prevent cracking and things like that. Now, it's something that I think I may have mentioned before, but what I tend to do is I'll take a bog standard plastic carrier bag, and I will put this in it when I'm not carving, and I'll put in a handful of shavings because they've got some moisture in them, and just leave that in there with a very small hole at the opening just to allow some moisture to escape. What that does is it allows this to dry out a lot more slowly than it would do if I just left it here in between carving sessions. And that's the thing, one of the inherent problems of carving with green wood, or any sort of working with green wood, it does have a tendency to crack and check when it dries. So what you want to do is basically slow down that drying process. Now I use plastic bags. I know other people who will use a cardboard box. Same method, they'll put some shavings in there, they'll put it in the cardboard box, they'll close the lid up with a little bit of a gap, and basically anything to keep some moisture in there, so while it's drying out, there's moisture in the air so that it doesn't dry out too quickly. One of the big problems I've found, and this was sort of when I very first started carving, I was living in a flat, I didn't have a workshop or anything like that, so I kept everything indoors. And even in a plastic bag, I was finding that the warm air or the warmer air that you have inside a house or a flat will dry out a piece of green wood far too quickly. And what will happen, especially on something like this, is quite thick, as it starts to dry, the moisture will sort of turn into sort of vapour, and it will try to escape out the wood. And obviously when that happens, it's putting pressure on the wood itself, and something like this where there are different thicknesses, and you do want to try and avoid that. In an ideal world, I would have kept this completely uniform thickness, because I'm doing this in stages, because I've got quite a bit on at the moment, so I couldn't get it all done in one day. What it basically meant was that you know, the bits up here that are thinner, or even down in the bottom of the bowl there, will dry out quicker than these big thick sections on the side. The problem with that is that the thinner sections are therefore prone to cracking. So my advice would be, put it in a box, put it in a plastic bag, leave some shavings in there, leave it outside in a workshop, garage, shed, anything like that, and that should hopefully allow it to dry out a lot more slowly and prevent cracking. And there's always a risk. I've had several bowls, spoons, you name it. You know, if I've tried to make it, I've had at least one crack on me due to it drying out too quickly. And sometimes the plastic bag helps. On other times it doesn't. It all really just depends on the piece of wood, you know, the thicknesses, etc. But that's just my take on it. I'm going to spend another sort of 10 or 15 minutes just working on this, and I'll come back when it's in slightly better shape. So we're not doing too badly, guys. We're making a good start on the edges. It's still quite thick, still obviously like a nice big lump on the bottom. What I've done, I've marked out roughly the centre of the bowl, and this area is what I want to leave flat. And what I want to be doing is coming in at an angle like this, coming down until we reach roughly here. And one of the easiest ways I've found to do that, especially when working on a round like this, is once you've done the initial bit, as we already have done, is kind of just get this to the side of your carving bench or your chopping block or whatever it is you're using, and then come in at an angle like this, just on the outside of your chopping blocks. If you try and do it when you're on there, you just keep binding up on the actual chopping blocks. If you just have it slightly over the edge here, again, make sure your fingers and your hand are well out of the way, somewhere around the back here, and just come in at an angle, like so. So what you're doing, coming in at an angle like that, and just, you know, it is a very gradual process, and I think I've mentioned this in a couple of my other videos as well. What you don't want to be doing is trying to shear off a great big lump of wood. All that's going to do is you'll end up making a mistake, or you'll end up taking too much wood off. And the same as a lot of things, you know, you can take off too much and there's nothing you can do about it. If you take off too little, and you take your time over it and there's too much still there, you can take off another small piece and then another small piece. So again, my advice for doing this is always be sort of cautious when you're carving, and you know, if you're unsure, or even if you're fairly confident, always take off less than you think you need to. That way, if you do end up slipping or you know, cutting in a little bit too deeply, hopefully you haven't ruined, you know, a good few hours worth of work. Okay guys, so I've finished off with the rough hewing, and as you can see, we're starting to look a little bit more bowl shaped, which is good. Still not pretty deep in here, and what I'm going to do, rather than trying to take too much off out here, because I quite like the shape we've got to now, what I'm going to do is actually start scooping out a bit more in here. I'm going to use a little bit of the gouge again, and then I'm going to move over to one of my spoon knives. But before I do that, I want to introduce you to another tool that I use fairly regularly, and this is a farrier's knife, or a farrier's hook knife, and basically it's very, very similar to a spoon knife or a hook knife, whatever you like to call them, and it's used for trimming down horses' hooves. And these are really, really good little knives. They're very cheap. You can pick these up you know, for very little money on places like eBay and things like that. And the traditional kind of hook knife, or crook knives as they used to be known, crooked knives, they're not just used for hollowing out sort of bowls and things like that. You can actually use them as more of a traditional style knife. So the way I would use it here is basically just along the outside of the bowl, just to tidy it up a little bit, same as you would a normal knife. Now you can use a regular knife for this, and I probably will do at some point, and I certainly have done in the past. But basically you kind of hold this almost like you're sort of peeling vegetables, and basically you just smoothing down some of these areas. And it's just because this doesn't have a point on it, as you can see, you've got a kind of little hooked over end piece, and because there's no point, it's just a slightly safer type of knife to use. Now again, if you're fairly confident in your knife techniques, there's no reason why you can't use a regular knife for this, and as I say, I have done in the past, but it's quite a nice little way just to sort of smoothing things down. I won't do too much of this on camera, I'll come back once I've got some of this done, but just as an example, I just want to get a small section of this smoothed off. Hopefully you can see on the camera there, this little section here, it's certainly not by all means not finished, but if you look at that in comparison to say this bit here, there is quite a stark difference. You know, this is a lot smoother, a lot nicer looking, and it just basically prepares the area a lot more sort of ready for sort of sanding, that kind of thing. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to spend probably another half an hour or so just going around this bowl, just smoothing it out. And I think I'll probably call that a wrap for this particular video. And what I'll do, I'll come back next time I've got some time to do a bit more carving, and what we'll start doing is scooping out the inside of this bowl just a little bit more, trying to sort of thin down these walls, just in order to make the bowl a little bit more usable, a little bit deeper, a little bit wider. But I hope that was useful, guys. Comments and questions below as always. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I hope you'll all join me next time. Thanks, guys.